Good morning. My name is Louise Flax. I'm going to teach you about one of my favorite techniques called grid enlargement. I'm very fond of it because it helps you learn to see. The challenge in learning how to see, to learn how to draw realistically, is figuring out what exactly you are seeing. And I think grid enlargement is one of the best ways of doing that. There are a number of steps we're going to be taking. And these are the steps. I wrote everything down. I want to show you some ideas for pictures. Feel free to use anything that is in your environment. So I have a lot of art books, so if you think this would be cool to do, great. Something like this. So here's a nice picture by Matisse of flowers. Great idea. Maybe you can find something in a book. Things with lines are easier. If you were fortunate enough to see the Avery show and have the catalog, as I fortunately do, this would be a great one to do. Lines are very easy. I am going to be using two things to show. One is a photograph. Yes, this is a Bruce Museum brochure. Yes, this is a picture of me and also my husband. And the other thing I am going to be using today is a drawing by Matisse, and it's this one. The important thing is people like to pick photographs, and photographs tend to be harder to do because your eye does not see exactly the way a photograph does. But whatever you choose, if you can turn it into lines, you will learn the skill. And that's the important thing. Next step is tracing your picture. You've chosen it, now you're going to trace it. Tracing paper can work very nicely, but here we are all at home. Maybe you don't have tracing paper. I found some translucent paper in my art supplies. I found some of this, but I couldn't find any really thin tracing paper. And then I went into my gift wrapping stuff, and this is tissue paper. Maybe you have one of those things. If you don't have those things, you might have computer paper. If you don't have that, maybe you have some lined paper hanging around. So the thinnest paper that you can find, the easiest to see through that you can find, is what's going to work best. And the next thing is, how do you trace it if you can't see it very well? Some of you might have a light box at home. For those of you who don't have a light box at home, use a window. I want to quickly demonstrate how to trace something using a window. So I just have some words on here. I wrote something I want to trace, and I'm putting it up there. And then whatever I want to trace it on, And the paper I'm using here is just computer printer paper. I'm going to move so you can see the camera so you can see how easy that is to see. It's easy to see, and then once it's on the window, you just start tracing it. Now that my drawing is traced, it's time for me to put a grid on it. So I need to measure this. And what I'm seeing is this is 5 1/4 inches. 5 1/4 inches is going to be very annoying. So I'm going to go down here and make it 5. And so I know I've got 5 inches this way. And here I've got almost 4 inches. I will make it a full 4 inches. The next thing I want to do is I want to look at my lined paper. And this lined paper, it does not line up with inches. It's important when you're doing your grid to have even units. If it's not easy for you to calculate halves and thirds and quarters, you can make your even units metric. You can make them regular inches. It's just important that it's even, because that way you don't get confused. If you don't tend to get confused with that kind of math, do what's going to work for you. But it is important that you're always keeping things exactly the same in proportion. So when I realized my lined paper wasn't going to be easy for me to measure, I found some index cards. And of course, the other thing about the index cards is they're a nice right angle, so that will also help me. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure that my picture is lined up perfectly. If this line at the bottom isn't straight, none of it's going to line up. So I think what I'm going to do is extend this line with my ruler very carefully. I'm just using an ordinary number 2 pencil here. I don't need anything fancy. I'm going to extend that and make sure that's lined up. And then I'll tape it with a tiny piece of tape. I don't think it's as lined up as I'd like it to be. I don't think my line was quite accurate enough. This looks a little better. So it's hard to keep stuff even. It's hard to keep stuff straight. So if I want my picture to end at 4 inches, here's the 4-inch point. So it's going to be just a tad higher. So I'm going to make this line. How do I know I'm the same distance? How do I know it's square? This line is lining up. The ruler line this way is lining up with the edge, so I know this is straight. And while I'm here, I'm just going to slip the ruler down a bit and measure the inch marks. All right, so let's scoot over to this side. Make sure I'm even, careful. There's my 5-inch. lining up. I'm lining up this line. And here I have these measurements. I will do this. So now I've made all my little ticks. And I'm going to use colored pencils. These are the cheapest, most basic colored pencils you can get. If you're stuck home and you don't have any colored pencils, use a plain pencil. So I began to make my line, but it wasn't lined up with the little tick. So I want to really keep my pencil right next to my ruler. If you do work with markers, sometimes smearing can be a problem. The reason I want to use a color is it will make it easier for me to see. I have done a lot of grid enlarging, and I've developed various techniques to make it easier for me to see and control what I'm doing. I'm going to rotate that to make it easier to do the line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a series of diagonals. So I want diagonals connecting all of my corners. So, and I don't make it with the same color. Again, I want to clearly distinguish between my aid, what's going to help me do this, and the actual drawing I'm trying to copy. And so I use color to make it easier for me to see what I'm doing. If there's an area, which there isn't in this picture, that has a lot of little fiddly stuff, I would also use this X to make an extra square. So here is the finished drawing. I've got all my stuff traced. I've got my blue horizontals and verticals, and I've got my red diagonals, and this shows if you have a complicated bit, which I hope you won't have, but if you do, that's how to deal with it. This is the finished grid I did for the bigger grid. So the question is, how do I get from this 1-inch grid to the bigger grid? And the answer is very simple for me. The question for you is, how big do you want your piece to be? What do you want it to look like? What is your ultimate purpose for it? And you're the only person who can decide that. How do you make the bigger grid? You use a ruler, you measure it. If you have graph paper that makes it easier, go for it. If you have lined paper in inches, that's an even measurement in inches or an even measurement in centimeters, great. And the important thing about your second grid is it needs to be accurate. Once you have your small picture and your big picture, then it's time to start copying. I am going to start right here in the top corner. So I can see there's nothing here, there's nothing here, and then there are 2 lines here. So how do I know where this line should be? Well, first of all, I look here, and this, if I had to guess, I'd say this is the middle. Most people can see middle. It's harder to see thirds. So if this is the middle, that line's going to hit it there. And now let's look at this. This feels like the middle about there. So if the middle is there, it's going to hit there. And then what's this shape? It's going to go about like this. And then here. Now you can, is not easy. You have to check and double check and keep on doing it. So this is the finished product. All the lines drawn in. This is the eraser that I used, but you can use a regular eraser like that. This is the pencil that I used, but any pencil that works for you is great. And I'll hold this a little longer, so if you can see something that wasn't quite accurate, wonderful. So that is how to do grid enlargement. I hope everything made sense to you. Again, in conclusion, I want to say it is a wonderful way to train your eye to see shapes, to really push yourself to figure out what is going on here. What am I actually seeing? Have fun doing art. Bye-bye.